All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Teach Me Tuesday. This, of course, is myself, Ursinity, and my co-host Beedub. Hello, Beedub.
Hello.
This is our first show now that you are back in the UK.
Yes.
Think, well, you did one last week with Proud of, obviously. But
I was incredibly jet lagged, and just thinking back to that episode, it's kind of embarrassing because Proud would say something, and I was just all I could muster up was to say, interesting. It was real bad. Recording at 4 a.m. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, Proud and I have done that before. Not recently, but back when Proud was on the East Coast, back when Proud was on the West Coast in California and I was on the East Coast, we had a few nights where it was just like, both of us are the type of people to be up at late at night, Proud more so than me. But we definitely had some times where I was just recording until like 2 or 3 a.m. and it definitely drags on you.
Yeah.
That came out fine, though. So we are sponsored today, as per usual, by Unicorn. That is UNIKRN. And our new sponsor for the time being, Pugna, PVGNA. And similarly, we will hear more about them later. So before we get into today's topic that everybody knows because it was the title of this podcast, we are going to talk a little bit about the new rank system and both of our experiences in it so far. So, B, how much have you played of it? Have you even started the calibration yet?
I have not yet. I'm a little bit nervous about doing it because obviously I've never played ranked ever at all.
Not even party ranked?
I think I did like one game by accident with like a group and they were like, oh, let's do ranked. And I was like, oh, okay. But I feel like there's less pressure. It just kind of felt like a normal game, whereas it's different if it's just you kind of, it's going to be ranked, and it's I don't know, it's a lot of pressure. But I think like I'm a little bit confused about the new ranked system in the fact that solo and party's kind of wrapped up into one-ish, but solo has more kind of bearing on your MMR now, right?
Yeah.
Am I misunderstanding this?
No, that is the crux of it. It is not super. They were never typical Valve. They were never super specific in saying that. Like my assumption would be like, well, solo games count twice as much as party games, let's say, for your badge. But they never said that, so it could mean that solo games are 4 times as important as party games, or they could be like 1.5 times as important. We really don't know. But yeah, in all of the ranks, let me see, I'm still in the process of memorizing the ranked names, or the ranking names. So in the new system, you can go up through Legend, which is the 5th tier of medals, which with both solo and party. However, Ancient and Divine, the 2 highest tiers, are only affected by solo, and that means you can't calibrate above Legend in party. And my understanding so far is that your medal is whichever is higher, and of course your medal and your amount of stars cannot go down until you recalibrate 6 months from now.
Right.
So if you are, like I just calibrated to Divine 0, so my badge will never show anything below Divine 0, even if I lost 3,000 MMR. I could lose 3,000 MMR, and then in the next season, I might calibrate into Archon, let's say, or I don't even know what that would equate to. Probably like Archon or whatever. But I would still hold that Divine badge for the entire rest of the season. So it only shows your peak. And if you have both party and solo, it shows whichever one is higher, again, is my understanding.
Okay. I see.
So if you are, let's say your solo is Archon 2, and then your party is Archon 3, it will show Archon 3 on your badge thing whenever you play ranked games or just whenever people go to your account, right?
Okay, right.
And yeah, so it's factored in both MMRs are factored into getting that badge. I think I'm still somewhat confused, and I don't have a good way to test it either because I have not calibrated my party either. So I calibrated my solo. I calibrated 50, 63, and then I climbed to 51, 44. I had a really good day of Dota on Saturday, so I was very fortunate for that. It really re-inspired me to enjoy Dota again because I had a brief lull of Dota depression. But so I'm in Divine 0, which I was happy with. I was expecting more to get like High Ancient, so yeah, I'm content. What like it's hard to approximate what you'll get given that you did not play ranked beforehand, but do you think you'll calibrate like they kind of rescaled to how the MMR system works, but are you thinking like what would be like a happy surprise for you to get, and what would you be kind of disappointed in? I think would be how I would word this very vague, weird question.
I guess the thing, I don't even know. I don't feel like I really have kind of expectations anymore. Like I don't really know where, because I know everyone's a bit lower now, I think. Is it? Didn't they kind of do
mostly
the
on the high end.
Oh, okay.
Like my understanding is that like a lot of people lost like 100 or 200 points in the like sub 4K, sub 3K range, but the rescaling really only significantly affected people that were like 7K or 8K, and they were losing like thousands of points. Like Sumail lost 3,000 points, for instance. Like he went from 10K to 7K.
Right,
and because they're trying to bring everything back to the middle ground and make it, because like it used to be a really big deal. Like when, what was it? Miracle was the first guy to hit 8K, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably wrong. But whoever was first guy to hit 8K, that was like a really big thing. And now it's like there's tons of 8Ks because people just have spent so much time playing ranked that gradually over time they increase. So now with it being rescaled every 6 months back to like a middle point, it won't be that much of a, I don't think we'll see numbers that high.
Yeah.
Or at least it'll be much more infrequent rather than like having a dozen different pros be 10K.
Yeah. I think I'd be happy calibrating at like 2.5 somewhere, especially as I'm not kind of doing, which is, I mean, before they kind of changed all the rankings and stuff, I was waiting until I kind of improved until I could rank higher. But there doesn't seem to be any point in waiting anymore. So I think I'd be okay mid 2K. I kind of just want to know where I would be based now that it doesn't, like, you know, if it's awful, then it doesn't matter so much as it used to now, I guess, because you can kind of only go up, right? So that pressure's...
That's my feelings,
yeah,
exactly.
so the pressure's being taken off. So I think I'd be okay somewhere in 2K, honestly.
Yeah. There's been some complaints, even from myself, that they position this as a full recalibration, but for the vast majority of people, it is not a individual recalibration so much as it is a recalibration of the system overall. So Valve is taking the whole MMR system, the whole rank system, and they're recalibrating it to bring down those really high-end numbers and bring up those really low-end numbers.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get it back to that like middle ground point of like making 5K and 6K impressive compared to people having like a dozen different Smurfs that are all 6K because they're an 8K player and they just farm MMR and they need practice counts. So a lot of people, you know, myself included, because I have a Smurf that I have absolutely no reason to play anymore because it's like 3,500. And I was expecting like, oh, I can just recalibrate this account and I'll do well in these games and I'll gain like way more MMR than I would have if I just played 10 games normally. And then like the MMR that you calibrate to is very based on your previous MMR.
I see.
Like overly so. So there's no real opportunity for example, a lot of people, myself included, before this were excited like, oh man, now all the account boosters are going to lose a ton of MMR because they're going to be recalibrated.
Oh.
But instead they probably lost like barely any, or, you know, a bit. Like some people are losing a lot of MMR up like around 4K, 5K.
Yeah.
I forget, like... It's very regular to hear people around like 4K plus have lost like 200, 300 MMR. I honestly have no earthly idea how I gained MMR. So I'm just going to like count my blessings and, you know, chalk it up to good karma. Yeah. But it's not as grandiose a change as I think some people were expecting.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm
excited though.
Yeah, I might try and get calibrated this week. So next week I can say...
Yeah, I just sat down and
I know it's
grinded. I ground it out in like 2 days. So you could definitely do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe this time next week I'll be sobbing because I only got like 900 MMR or something.
Yeah, you'll be a herald. I mean, yeah, it is only a number at the end of the day, too. So, or it's only a badge, I suppose. I mean, you still do have your number, but it's fun. I like that there's less pressure to the system because it goes away every 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it quote unquote goes away every 6 months when, you know, your new calibration is based off your old one anyway.
Yeah.
It'll be cool. It'll be interesting if they retool the system also in the future. But who knows? It's Valve, so nothing sensical will happen. We'll wake up one day and they'll say like, yeah, it's gone now. There's no more ranked. Or, oh, you know, everything is ranked. Everything's together. Who really knows?
Yeah, because how much bearing does... Because you kind of have an unranked MMR, right? It has...
Yeah. Yep.
So how much of bearing will that have on me
all of it
getting ranked? Like that, it will be based off that, I guess, right?
Yeah, so your first games are based off of your unranked MMR. If you've never played ranked before and you don't have a calibrated MMR, your unranked is what determines, you know, the average game you're going to go into. So if you're in, like, you know how unranked has bracketing where they have the normal skill, high skill, very high skill? If you're in high skill, we approximate that, and actually this approximation probably has changed with the new system. I hadn't even thought of that, but high skill is generally like low 3K to high 3K, and then very high is high 3K into, you know, the great beyond. And then normal is everything else, which is the vast majority of players. So if you are in, let's say, normal skill and on average you're getting placed with 2K players, it's a safe assumption that when you go into rank, they're going to place you with 2K players. And if you overperform, then you're going to gradually go up and up. Yeah. And the way it seems is that your unranked games pre-calibration do matter way more than the actual calibration games themselves.
I see. Okay.
So it's like, for instance, if I was to go on your account, that wouldn't make you calibrate to Divine 0 because even if I performed exactly as I would perform on my regular account, it's just that your unranked games have so much bearing on where you calibrate that you can't just suddenly have like you couldn't pay an account booster to just go on an account and that is uncalibrated, play 10 games of Tinker mid, win all 10, and then suddenly be 5K or whatever. Like, that's just not how that works, right? Because unranked MMR is the vast majority of bearing on where you will calibrate.
Yeah, so even though I haven't been playing ranked like this whole time, I've pretty much been playing ranked.
Yeah, you've been playing like pseudo-ranked. Okay. Yeah. It's like kind of sort of ranked, right? Because they still have to have those skill approximations, even in unranked, right? Otherwise, unranked would be even more of a mess than it currently is. Like even Smurf accounts, like you can make an account and within like 10 games, you will know, the system will figure out like, oh, this person is a Smurf, they should be in very high skill. Or this person is a new player, they should be very low. Or, oh, this person's an average player, they should be in the middle. So you can approximate by that. Yeah. But it'll be fun. It'll be good fodder for Teach Me Tuesday, I hope. All right, so today's episode is going to be focused. We're going to be doing a bit of a lesson on Invis just as a trait, as a mechanic in Dota 2, because I feel like people, A, because I've gotten messages asking me to do this, but B, I feel like Invis is something that people both overestimate at lower levels and underestimate at high levels, which is a very sweeping statement that I do not want to ever be held to. But I think that Invis is, people oversimplify what Invis does and what Invis is useful for. So I want to get a little bit more into the inner workings and complexity that Invis has to it. So to start off, let's just talk about why Invis, like what its core usefulness, key usefulness. I need to replace my, I can't use the word core anymore. Proud has got me on that one, and it's a good thing that he's been paying attention to. I can't use the word core. Because people think about like cores like safe lane, mid lane, and it's it's a very poor word to use in Dota terminology. So the key thing that Invis does, obviously, it makes you Invis, right? But what does that accomplish, right? All it does is that it allows you more freedom to move. Yeah. And then that in turn allows you to either be more aggressive or it allows you to get out of situations and be more defensive. Right, it's less so about actually being invisible as like a mechanic, because if people know you're invisible, they can just pop sentry wards down, pop dust, whatever. But having Invis just on your hero, whether it's through an ability like Bounty Hunter Invis or through a Glimmer Cape or through Shadowblade, it opens up your ability to move around. And Dota is very much a game of mobility. And so even when you're countered, even if the enemy team has a bounty hunter, let's say, and you're tracked, Invis is still a useful thing to have, just as a facet of your hero that adds extra levels of complexity. The other big and important thing about Invis is that having even one Invis item on your team or one Invis spell puts an incredible economic burden on the enemy team. And so even if you are not making use of your invisibility to its fullest extent, like let's say you're playing Slark, you're playing Slark, and you have a Shadow Blade, even if you are not ganking with that Shadow Blade, the enemy team is still investing a lot of money into buying sentry wards. They're putting sentry wards at choke points that you might not even go to. They have dust you're gonna Dark Pact off, right? They have all these kind of things that they have spent tons and tons of money on, and in a lot of games you'll spend thousands of gold on sentry wards and whatnot. So placing this huge economic burden on the enemy team, especially the enemy supports, because cores generally you don't see buying as many sentries and whatnot. Maybe they'll buy dust if they're smart, but a lot of times they won't, and then they'll just yell at their teammates and be like, "Oh man, these supports, they don't buy dust."
Yes.
So
I feel that pain. I felt that pain many times.
Yeah. Us support players, it's rough. We've all been in that place, and this kind of contributes to one of the things that I'll get into as I transition to talking about the offensive uses of Invis. Is that Invis is very useful and very strong at choking the opponent out. Basically, it creates this economic burden where your support that would have liked to build an urn can't build an urn, or has to build one very late because they need to get sentry wards because there's a bounty hunter harassing their mid laner, or they need to buy dust because the enemy is running like an offlane weaver and they need to deal with this. And if they don't deal with this, then the offlane weaver just free farms and harasses their carry, so that can't happen. So this support, instead of being able to invest ballpark what is like 800 some odd gold into an urn, they have like just a ring of regen, because they needed to spend all their money on getting dust and sentries and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, and then on from a core aspect, when you have Invis, it allows you so much, like I was saying, freedom to move around the map, that it chokes the opponent out, in the sense that they, instead of being able to farm their jungle safely, they have to constantly be worried about like, oh man, there could be an LC on top of me ready to duel, or oh man, like if I find this weaver, I can't do anything about it. I don't have true sight. Like there's just so many problems that it creates. So it's a very multi-pronged pressure on the opposing team. So let's get right into offensive uses. So the first and probably the most obvious offensive use is aggressive roaming. We see this from heroes like LC, or heroes like Slark, or Lena is another good example. What's his name? Spiritbreaker. Yeah. He's another very good example. These are the heroes that classically we think of like, oh man, like he just got his Shadow Blade on Slark. He's immediately going to be ganking lanes. He's going to be, super pressuring. And then at the same time, you need to have, your supports need to be aware of that and say, oh, he just got his Shadow Blade. I need to have sentries. If I don't have sentries right now, somebody's going to die. The other big usage is, and this is more of a usage we see less at lower and mid-tier MMRs, but one of the more effective things that you can utilize as a player, if you are in those MMRs to get out, is using your Shadow Blade or your Glimmer Cape, what have you, to set up big team fight ults. This is why you see Earthshakers, they frequently will have, like, as a third item, build a Shadow Blade. And it's not because they're Shadow Blading in, it's because they're Shadow Blading and then the enemy team does not see them. Let's say it's daytime, right? Daytime, you have extra vision, you're sieging a high ground. You place one high ground ward, and then you can see basically the entire thing. So that makes it incredibly hard to initiate if you're playing a Magnus, right? Because the enemy team knows exactly where you are, and they see, oh man, he's running up. I'm going to just like run away or disperse. And then you're going to avoid the RP. But if that Magnus has a Shadow Blade, Sentry vision is much smaller than Observer Ward vision. And sentries are not, reasonably, there's no way there's going to be a sentry that's going to see this Magnus. So if you Shadow Blade your Mag or your Earthshaker, whatever, or even like an Axe, I've seen Axe Shadow Blades quite a bit, then it allows them to lull the enemy team to a false sense of security, especially if they don't know you have this Shadow Blade. And then you get the perfect ult every time, assuming that, you're good. So that's why we see Shadow Blades come out on heroes like Earthshaker. And that's why it's so effective. Even just having a Shadow Amulet on Earthshaker is incredible. And this is why, like, a Shadow Amulet on a Slark, or that's a bad example, a Shadow Amulet on a Lina is not very effective, right? Because it makes you into like a really bad version of TA, I guess. Like, you're just sitting in one spot and you can't do anything. And like, sure, there's no cooldown, so you can gradually move along. But they'll just kill you. Like, they'll figure it out. They'll put a sentry down. Or they'll just AoE stun, whatever. But if you have a Shadow Amulet, you can just Shadow Amulet yourself as like an Earthshaker within range while they're coming up to siege. And then you have all the effectiveness of a Shadow Blade, except you didn't spend another 1,400 gold on a Claymore, right? So that's another added advantage. We also see some usage from heroes like Crystal Maiden or Witch Doctor that buy Glimmer Capes. Sure, they're not a Shadow Blade, but a Crystal Maiden can Glimmer Cape herself and then ult, and she will be glimmered while ulting. Or a Witch Doctor can glimmer and then be glimmered while he's ulting. And a lot of times, and what I would kind of say is the most important factor that is introduced by using Invis as an offensive tool is that it creates a lot of havoc for the enemy team, and also it makes them flame each other and tilt, which is always a bonus. Because a lot of times you don't know, or somebody uses Invis, especially right after they get an item, you have no clue what's going to happen, and you just start saying like, "Oh man, nobody has sentries. Oh man, nobody has dust," and then support says, "Oh well, I use my 2 dust in the last 2 fights, so of course I don't have dust," and then they start to implode because they say, "Oh man, these cores, they're too selfish, they don't buy dust," or "Oh man, these supports, they don't have enough sentry wards," stuff like that.
It is the most frustrating thing when you just kind of feel like everyone's just kind of like, it does put the whole team into kind of like a state of like of a frenzy, and everyone's just running around, no one's really doing anything, and everyone's just terrified of whoever the Invis hero is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those weird things where it makes a very manageable problem unmanageable, right? Like Slark, like let's use Slark as an example. He's fighting, and then he's a very easy hero to kill. This is a terrible example, actually. Let's use Magnus. The Magnus blink RP'd, and he's fighting your team, but he messed up the RP, and then your team is turning it around, and they're going to win. But then he just Shadow Blades away. And this very manageable problem of just a Magnus is now a very unmanageable problem because you don't have dust. And what the heck are you going to do to him? So there's a huge element of frustration that comes along with that territory, right? Or like if you're killing a bounty hunter, it's like bounty hunter has like 800 HP at level 12. Like, this is not a consequential hero that we should be worried about, but you don't have dust and you don't have sentries, and this super easy kill has become you guys just running around aimlessly, unable to kill a 4-position support at 25 minutes because nobody had dust, or nobody used enough, or people just didn't, they already used their dust, or whatever. So those are some of the core offensive things that come along with Invis. And I think part of this lesson is very, very obvious. I think everybody listening to this, or most people listening to this, is going to say like, "Oh man, I know that. Like, that's pretty simple." But the little things are what matters, right? Thinking about things like building a Shadow Blade on a Magnus or an Earthshaker. Those are the little plays that make a game won versus losing a game. And it's the kind of thing where a lot of people slack and they don't do that. Axe, similarly, any big initiator you want to have a Shadow Blade on, especially it's a very affordable item, right? 2,700 gold and a little bit of mana, super, super good. All right, so let's get into some of the defensive uses, and again, we'll try to get a little more on the complex side rather than the obvious thing of you people can't see you. That's kind of simplistic. So, knowing the obvious way that it's useful defensively, we have to think, what can we do that we would not be able to do otherwise without Invis? So, for example, Lina, if you have a Shadow Blade, you can split push super far if you have a Shadow Blade because you can just run away. Whereas if you do not have that Shadow Blade, you are a relatively squishy hero that probably doesn't have a BKB yet, and then probably doesn't have a Lincoln's, and maybe your only evasive tool is like a Yule's, and if you want to be fast, you have to cast a bunch of spells, which slows you down. Yep. So you can't split push that far if you are a solo Lina. But if you're solo laning with the Shadow Blade, you can say, all right, I see their supports top. Their supports are the only ones with dust. I'm split pushing bottom. I have complete freedom to hit this tier 2 tower 10 times, let's say. And then they TP and, then I have to leave, whatever. But that Shadow Blade has allowed me to do all of that. Without that Shadow Blade, I would not be able to do that. And this kind of core, again, this kind of key element also allows, similarly, for you to make very aggressive pick-off plays, stuff like that, and just aggressive fighting in general, right? A lot of times people dictate aggressive fights based on smokes, right? You say, all right, it's 32 minutes. The enemy team is going to Roshan pretty soon, or let's say they're in Rosh right now. We know because we scouted it with, let's say like a Clockwork Rocket, but they're still in there because they think that we can't fight them. You smoke, and the enemy team is expecting this, right? But if you smoke and then your, whoever Shadow Blades forward, your smoke is not broken yet, but you now have all this additional information and you can set up that much more effectively because you have this invis hero in the pit, or at least closer. Let's say they have a sentry in the pit. You can Shadow Blade around, whereas smoke would have just broken and everything would have just popped off right from there.
That's. I've never thought about that before. That's.
Yeah. It again, like a lot of these things, we all know this, right? As Dota players, that Dota is a much simpler game when you're talking about it than it is in practice, right? So, like me talking about this, there are plenty of times where I just don't build a Shadow Blade I build a Shadow Blade and I just don't use it properly. Or I build a Glimmer Cape and I just don't use it properly, whatever. Whereas in practice, if somebody asked me, what do I do in this situation? I say, all you do is use Shadow Blade and then you walk around and then you ult. Bam, simple. But in practice, there's so many extra elements. You're thinking, oh man, do they have vision? Do they not have vision? I don't know. Like, am I going to be able to kill them? Our Sven doesn't have farm, and he already uses blink. Is he not going to be able to get here in time? X, Y, and Z, yada, yada, yada. There's so many problems. So that's why it is important to go over these kind of relatively simple things and reiterate on some level, but also to make it sound a little cooler than just reiterating. You have to hammer in these concepts. That way, once you're actually in a game, you are not second guessing yourself and you're not saying, oh man, can I do this? Can I not do that? What should I do? You say, oh, they have no way to find me. I can move around with impunity if I have a Shadow Blade. I'm going to build a Shadow Blade and everything will be golden. That also defensively, we talk about like introducing elements of chaos and confusion to the enemy team. If you have a Glimmer Cape, that's probably the best example because I feel like people do not build dust and sentries for Glimmer Capes as much.
Yeah.
And that's based on no scientific study at all. That's just me saying words. But Glimmer Capes, people are like, oh yeah, it's a Glimmer Cape. I'm going to do less magic damage. But really, like, sure, you're going to do less magic damage, but also more importantly, they're going to be invisible. Or I shouldn't say more importantly, but in a lot of cases, more importantly, they're going to be invisible. And this is applying to anybody you want. So you can make, like, let's see. I had a game recently where I built a Glimmer Cape on, not Jakiro, some hero, and I made my Sven invisible. And nobody expects that Sven to be invisible. He doesn't have a Shadow Blade. Nobody on my team has Shadow Blades, and all I have is Glimmer Cape. But instead, my Sven gets the perfect initiation because I Glimmer Caped him in.
Oh.
And that's the kind of thing where people just don't expect that.
That is so good, actually.
And it is...
Like, that is something...
Yeah, and you just win a fight off that
I don't
entirely.
think I've ever done that. And, like, I mean, I've Glimmer Caped, like, my core, like, trying to get out of something, and then, I'll die or whatever. I've done the kind of, like, defensive Glimmer Caping, I guess, but I've never done... No one's expecting your core to have... Invis and Glimmer Caping them first. That is actually really good.
Yeah, and I mean that gets back to the thing that we were talking about earlier, where if you have a big team fight ult on your team, like a Tidehunter or a Magnus, right? A Tidehunter is not going to build a Shadow Blade, but a Magnus will. But if they are not expecting that Magnus to be invis, you can invis him, and then he gets that perfect initiation, and then everything is golden. And that core didn't even have to build the invis; you built it for them. And so this adds another additional unexpected element, right? Where the enemy team, they have so many things to worry about, right? As we talk about this, Dota, very simple in theory, but very difficult in execution. They have so many things to worry about. They're not going to be doing the mental calculations to say, oh, well, what if the enemy Crystal Maiden Glimmer Capes the Magnus, and then he goes forward, and then he ults us all, and then we all die? Because realistically, there's like no way they're going to be expecting that, even though that's a very simple play to make from your perspective as the CM and the Magnus. You say, hey, CM invis me, and then the Magnus just goes and does what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a really big element of Glimmer Cape specifically. And actually, let's see, you can... they've nerfed Shadow Amulet a bunch, but you can do that with Shadow Amulet also. I think you can cast on your teammates. I'm kind of certain that you can do that. I don't want to look it up, so I'm just going to say that that's true. The other main defensive element that I want to get into, which is one that oftentimes is kind of ignored, is being able to dodge spells. So you can dodge basically any projectile with invisibility. There is fade time, of course, and fade time does add like a little bit of extra element to some of these things, but I don't really want to talk about fade time because it's very complicated and very like numbery. Like different spells have different fade times, and some of them are of like a 0.25 second fade time, and others have like a 1 second fade time, and it's all a mess. So let's just say that fade times exist and they're important, but I'm not going to talk about it at length. So you can dodge basically any projectile spell and a lot of AoE targeted spells. So some easy examples, probably the best example would be you can dodge Stormbolt from Sven. You can dodge his stun with Invis. So if you're a bounty hunter and and Sven's stun's getting shot at you, you can Invis, and as long as you're not in your fade time, it will hit you but not do anything. It will stun the people around you actually because it's an AoE spell, but you can evade all the damage from that and you will not get stunned yourself.
Oh, interesting.
Similarly, you can dodge targeted AoE spells, so that means spells like Sleight of Fist, right? Sleight of Fist from Ember Spirit is a AoE spell, right? It's like, let's say 450 AoE. I don't know what it technically is. It's maybe like, it's probably around there, like 500. It's in that AoE, it will not hit invisible units. Obviously, like if he has a Battle Fury, it will cleave to you. But if you are invis, you will not take any damage and you will not be a target from that. So, for instance, if you're running away from a Ember Spirit, the play that the Ember Spirit will make more times than not is they're going to slight, and during the slight, they're going to use Bolus and ensnare you. But if you invis while running away, they can't do that because they can't see you, and the Sleight of Fist will not connect with you. Another example, like Luna Eclipse. If Luna uses Eclipse on, let's say like she's fighting a Juggernaut, the Juggernaut just uses she uses Eclipse, and the Juggernaut just Shadow Blades, waits for Eclipse to end, and then re-engages, and Eclipse has been completely wasted. Whereas before, he would have just died to the Eclipse. And Luna's not going to carry dust. Why would a Luna ever have dust? True. So, bam, like easy one fight. So dodging spells and even dodging projectiles, like if a OD is shooting an orb at you and you invis, actually orbs are very fast, but theoretically you could dodge it. If you dodge an orb with like Weaver invis, let's say, you've just evaded, potentially hundreds of damage if it's in the late game. So these are the things where we really have to think hard about what can we do and kind of push the boundaries of what invis is, right? Rather than just thinking about it simply and saying, oh, well, they can't see me. You have to think about more in a more complex way and saying, well, when can they see me? When is it more advantageous for them to not see me? When would they be expecting to not see me? When would they be expecting me to invis? When would they not be expecting me to invis? How much detection do they have? Do they have a gem? Do they just have dust? Do they have sentries? And then think about, like, if they only carry dust, that means that you can use offensively your Shadow Blades super effectively. But if they have if they have dust only, you can't escape with a Shadow Blade, right? So if you are a Earthshaker and you blink in to initiate with Echo Slam, you do your combo, and then they try to kill you and they have dust, well, you can't just Shadow Blade out because they're dusting you. And on top of them seeing you, you're also slowed because dust slows if it hits invis targets, but only by like 10%, I want to say. But if if they have sentries only, that means you can use it defensively, but you cannot use it offensively, right? Because if they have sentries, they're expecting you to invis in their direction, right? Use sentries primarily either as a defensive tool when you're defending or as a defensive tool when you're pushing. So that makes Shadow Blades way more useful as an escape tool, or if you're like a bounty hunter or whatever here that it just has an invis, makes it more useful as an evasive tool because they are very immobile, right? They are saying we have to fight on top of the sentry, otherwise we'll never kill that Weaver, and so that introduces other elements of you really have to think and be, as always, the most important advice in Dota, other than carry a TP scroll. Look at enemy items. Look at enemy items and say, hey, they're pushing and they don't have any vision. They used it all in the last fight. Now they're trying to push, but we just had a Weaver res, and the Weaver can just run around with impunity and win an entire fight because they have no way to see him or her. So, yeah, I think the last thing I want to get into on my side of Invis is talking about power spikes of invisibility, because Invis has very unique power spikes, and they are something you really need to abuse. Invis as a mechanic is not a static mechanic, right? Like stuns. Stuns are always good, period. Like a 3-second stun at 1 minute is just as good as a 3-second stun at 20 minutes, as just as good as a 3-second stun at 60 minutes. It's very consistent. Actually, that's not true anymore with the whole strength thing. Well, because like strength makes stuns worse late game. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because strength now, if you're a strength hero, or if you get an Aeon disc or whatever it's called, you get that. God, what's it called? You get. Let me look it up. You get. God, what the heck even is that trait called? It's like status resistance, I think it's called, and that. Yeah, and that makes stuns less effective. Let me just read the tooltip. On Sven, load. Let's see. Yeah, 3.4% status resistance on a Sven. So that means every stun will affect him for 3.4% less time, or every silence, or every, etc. So technically stuns do get worse late in the game.
Is that only if you have
anyway,
Aeon
that's
disc?
less important.
Wait, we're kind of going off on it. Okay.
No.
I think I've confused myself.
This is just a new thing. Well, Aeon Disc gives you that. Let me read Aeon Disc. I've actually literally never bought Aeon Disc. Aeon Disc gives you 25% passive status resistance. So a 4-second stun will affect you for 3 seconds if you have an Aeon Disc.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And strength heroes get status resistance passively.
Wait, what?
Because, yeah, from their strength. That's like, you know how every type of hero has a bonus now?
No.
So
wait.
strength heroes.
What?
Yeah. Oh my God, Beedub, no.
Oh God, have I just really embarrassed myself? Wait, what? I've never heard of. Okay.
It's a new thing from 7.07. To be fair, there's a lot of changes. So
okay,
it's easy
I've
to miss things.
completely missed this. What? Okay.
Okay.
My bad.
So strength heroes, I don't know the exact calculation, but strength heroes get status resistance with every point of strength. So let's say it's like he has 26 strength. So that'd be like 0.13, maybe? I can't do math. So let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, if you get 1% status resistance for every 10 strength, if you had 100 strength, you'd have 10% status resistance, which would mean that a 10-second stun would affect you for 9 seconds. So, and a 10-second silence would silence you for 9 seconds. Whereas for a non-strength hero, regardless of their strength, it would affect them for 10 seconds.
Okay.
And then agility heroes, they gain, I believe, is 1 point movement speed per point of agi.
Okay.
So if you built a butterfly, you would gain 35 movement speed on a top because of the 35 agility that it gives you. And then int heroes get magic resistance. I don't remember at what quantity though.
Okay.
I think it's like very, very small. And these are traits that are pretty not important and are only really noticeable on heroes that build a ton of something. So like a Morphling is going to move at absurdly high movement speed because the Morphling has, 7,000 agility at the late game because they have a Butterfly and a Scotty and they morphed into Agi. Whereas a Juggernaut, yeah, sure, they're going to move faster because they have a lot of Agi, but, whatever. It's not super consequential. Similarly, Sven is one of the few strength heroes, Sven and Pudge, I think, are the two real standouts, that gets a ton of status resistance because of his ult. And Int, really nobody gets consequential match resistance, except for like OD, I guess, because he builds like a crap load of Int. But yeah, that's the short little lesson on how that works now. So new information.
Oh, God. Anyway,
Back to Invis power spikes. So the three big power spikes are the power spike immediately as you get an item, preferably before you've revealed that you got an item. So if you get a Shadow Blade and you are and the enemy team can't see you, you want to use that Shadow Blade and get a kill right away. Or sometimes you'll see people not pick up their Shadow Blade even though it's done because they don't want to reveal it. Like if you're a Magnus and you sense that the enemy team is going to be pushing soon and you got a Shadow Blade in base, you don't even ferry it out to you because you know I'm farming and they see me. And then they're going to think, they're not going to realize that I have this in the next push where I suddenly surprise them and get a 5-man RP because I had a free Shadow Blade.
Oh, I see.
Same thing with like really any item like a Glimmer Cape or like a Nyx Vendetta, right? Nyx does timing pickoffs because he says, oh, I just hit 6. Or especially like a 4 Nyx, if you buy the Tome of Knowledge and you suddenly get 6 and the enemy team did not see you get 6, that's like a free gank right there because they're not planning on, they don't have anti-invis measures yet to make that simple, hopefully. It's like what Proud says all the time is that invis should guarantee you 1 usage and then the team reacts. So if you build a Shadow Blade, you should get 1 or 2 uses out of that guaranteed and have like get away scot-free or get easy kills, whatever. But after that, you should assume they have countermeasures and they can counterplay and you don't want to be hyper aggressive and potentially throwy. The other big power peak is in the very late game. In the very late game, people are not going to have these slots available to have dust and stuff like that in their inventory or sentries. Like, for instance, I've been playing a lot of Elder Titan. And in Elder Titan, I've had so many small items that... Let me pull up a game. This is a bad example. Well, it's not a bad example. So on Elder Titan, in the early game, I want to have a Magic Wand, because it's the best item in Dota. I want to have a Soul Ring, and I want to have Tranquil Boots, and I want to have a TP Scroll. That's 4 slots already. Then I build a Solar Crest, and I build a Medallion pretty early, which is another slot. So 5 of my 6 slots are already done. And I can either carry Dust, or I can carry Sentry Wards, and Observer Wards, of course. So already there, that's like... I'll probably have those items at like 18 minutes, let's say, if I'm having like an average game, maybe 15 minutes if I'm having a good game on 4-position Elder Titan. So very quickly, I'm running out of slots, right? And now picture this 45 minutes into the game. There's no way I have more than 1 slot. And even if I have 1 slot to hold dust or whatever, that's like, I'm doing some intense like intellectual bargaining because I want to be carrying a Magic Wand or I want to be carrying a Soul Ring, but instead I have to carry dust. So once you get into the super late game, that's where you hit another power peak of these things like whether, any kind of invis. And this is especially applicable to cores. In the early game, cores can afford to carry it around, and even in the mid game, depending on what core it is, they can afford to carry around dust. But once 30 minutes of it, there's no way that like a Morphling is carrying around dust or like a Juggernaut's carrying around dust. Like that's just not going to happen. That's very, very rare and uncommon. So that's when you hit another power peak and you suddenly, your Shadow Blade that was useful, then suddenly, they built a ton of stuff. Now it wasn't useful for like a 15-minute span in the mid game, let's say. And now it's super useful again because in this late game, nobody can afford, just slot-wise, to be countering you. This is only... The only problems that are encountered by this are like specific spells that counter it. So if they have like a Zeus, they're always going to have some degree of Invis Sight. If they have a Bounty Hunter, there's always going to be some degree of Invis Sight. If they have someone with an Ensnare, right? If a Naga Siren throws a net at you and you Invis, you're still visible in the net. Or if you get ensnared by if you get Bane ulted, that ult reveals Invis if you are Invis while he's ulting you. So if let's say you dust a Bounty Hunter, the dust fades, but your Bane is already ulting him, he still stays visible in that ult. Yeah. And the other power peak is if you're playing super aggressively and like we talked about earlier, you're choking at the enemy team. Their economy is so weak they can't afford to have sentry wards and stuff. We've all been in that situation, all of us support players, where it's like I need boots. Like I need my mana boots because it's 22 minutes. I'm playing Rubik. Yeah. I cannot live without mana boots. Like I need mana boots, so I cannot afford to buy another 2 sentries. And that's just going to happen. Like, you just get fed up at a certain point. You need to say, I need to be competitive in this game. I cannot possibly be this poor for this much longer. So yeah, that's about it, I think. Actually, one last little thing that we already touched on that I'll be brief is countering invis. So there's three. Obviously, there's hero-based counters that we touched on briefly, but those aren't really worth it to talk about because obviously. The things that I want to mention or reiterate is that sentries are useful when you want to be static, which is times where either the enemy team is pushing into you, or when you are pushing into the enemy and hey, we're going to be pushing tier 3 mid. If I put sentries like right outside of this range and then right outside of here, that's all I'll need. Whereas Dust is very useful for mobile fights, and it's very useful for offense. So if you're ganking a Clinks, Dust is going to be great because you're popping right on top of him. But if you're ganking a Clinks and you have a sentry ward, he might just run out of the sentry ward. Whereas you can't run out of Dust. You can purge Dust, of course, but that's a whole nother point. And then buying gems. Gems are good, but gems are more of a late game thing that is when you're trying to close out a game. If you have a tanky support, like let's say an Earthshaker, he can buy a gem and carry it around and be reasonably safe. But you don't want to be carrying a gem for 20 minutes. You want to be carrying a gem right when you say, hey, we're going to push, we're going to win, let's go push, and then you buy a gem because the enemy team has a Ricky and a Clinks or something, and you really need this dealt with. And then, because gems are a bit like, build early gems are scary. I don't have the confidence in my support play. Like, I played a game in a Lich bought a gem in like 18 minutes. And it was super effective, and like it won us the game. But I was like, man, I would never in a million years invest 900 of my hard-earned gold in a gem on a Lich at like 18 minutes. Like, I do not have the confidence to do that and not like be kicking myself because I lose it 2 minutes later. It's just so much money. Yeah. So yeah, and also like gems are particularly effective because it allows you to completely secure a vision advantage over the opponent team. And that's Invis, I hope. Do you have any questions about Invis specifically?
I guess like kind of going back to the Dust versus Sentries, I always find myself getting Dust. Well, it depends. It depends on. I think like I kind of focus too much on trying to get the kill on the Invis hero. And so I'll end up buying way too many sentries for the lane than I need to. Like, say for example, if I'm against a Weaver, and I should probably just kind of go, okay, I don't need to kill it, it's fine, just as long as the Weaver's not killing us, that's okay. But I end up kind of just getting a little bit fixated with it. And I'll buy like too many sentries, so I'm mega poor, and then I'll just end up getting Dust so that we can get the kill, but it's probably not really worth it, right? Like, yeah,
it's hard. I mean, I've been getting very tilted with the new ranked because I'm taking Dota really seriously again, and it's taking me some time to adjust. And I vividly remember in a game, let's see, I was playing Jakiro, I want to say, and I got very annoyed because the enemy team had a Invis hero, and somebody was just like, we never have Dust, we never have sentries. So I just bought 8 sentries, and I was just like, now we have sentries forever. And that's like the kind of time where it's overkill, right? In general, when I'm pushing, I want to have 4 sentries if I'm pushing, and even 4 can be a little overkill. Depends how fast you push and at what junctures you expect to need sentries. In the very early game, though, I would never have more than 2. Like if it's laning phase against a Weaver, 2 sentries is a very good amount. 1 is generally not enough, and 2 covers enough area where you should be able to secure a kill. Sometimes if they just luck out or if they know where your sentries are, they will evade it. Like let's say you have 2, you're playing Radiant safe lane, and you have 2 that are right up the lane, and the Weaver realizes that, then if you fight them, they just run off to the side, or they hide in the trees. And then, you're just kind of screwed and you've just spent 200 gold. But it gets them out of the lane, so even that's kind of useful. So, yeah, that's kind of those are my mental markers, is that if I'm pushing and we're doing like a really big, like we're trying to rax them push, I want to have 4 sentries, ideally. 3 is passable. But if I have if I have 2 or less, I feel like I really need to use these judiciously. And if I have 1, I just don't even want to push. Even if it's the right play, I just feel silly.
Why so many? Like where would you? So
Well,
so you're like so like let's say you're kind of pushing onto their. You're trying to get Rex, right? Like have you taken tower at this point? Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So let's say we are pushing for. Let's say we're a Radiant team, right? And we're pushing for Dire tier 3 mid, and we're trying to get Raxes from there. If I have one sentry, I can only possibly place it like, if I have one sentry, I'm going to place it right outside of the tower range. And if I have, and that means that if a fight ensues, like let's say they initiate on us with a Magnus, because Magnus is apparently the hero of the episode. They initiate on us with a Magnus, and they also have a Weaver on their team. The Magnus RPs us within the sentry range and then pulls us out of it, and then the fight is all out of it. Now they have a Weaver that's moving around fully freely, and sure, maybe I use a Dust, but maybe the Dust doesn't hit them, or maybe it does hit them and then it fades, because Dust only lasts like 20 seconds or something. If I had two sentries, though, I would have been able to cover both the side and the middle, or I would have been able to cover the middle, and then once a fight starts, then I can put it down. One thing I've taken to doing is that if a fight starts on a high ground, even if the tower is still there, I will place a sentry in the high ground, knowing that they will deward it immediately after the fight, or maybe even during the fight if they're really paying attention. I want to have that AoE vision control. So yeah, I want to have at least two. If I have four, I feel super comfortable. Three is what I would normally bring, though, because three gives me a little bit of wiggle room, where sometimes you just place a bad sentry.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I just, like, if you have one sentry, it's such a small amount of area. And if you have two sentries, it's like still a pretty small amount of area. And the second sentry, a lot of times you're going to hold for being a reactionary sentry. So then suddenly if they initiate on you from a different area, this has not helped you at all. So yeah, that's why I like to have at least three. And I like to have Dust as well. Usually, in my ideal comp, my 4 position support has Dust and my 5 position has sentries, or vice versa. As long as one has Dust and one has sentries, that makes it a bit more manageable slot-wise. And also slot-wise, I find myself... It's always hard to choose what item am I going to give up so that I can carry Dust or can carry sentries. Because like in those Elder Titan games I was talking about, if I have Tranquil Boots and a Soul Ring and a Wand and a TP Scroll, that's 4 slots, right? I would like to have an additional Wind Lace on top of that because the movement speed's great for my Astral Spirit. But if I am in a game against a Weaver, I really need to have a ton of Invis control. I need to have a lot of vision. So I'm just not going to have that Wind Lace. Whereas I would like to have a Wind Lace if the game did not have a Weaver in it.
Okay.
So yeah. Any other main questions?
Yeah, so the occasion, so I guess it's more against this question seems to be specifically about Broodmother, or well, no, I know. So I kind of, this was kind of, I'm trying to think of like scenarios, because this used to happen a lot when I was against a Broodmother who was in Viz, and like the sentries would just get dewarded every time. But actually, I'm kind of think like, I don't really tend to be against anyone actually in lane who stays in Viz anymore, so it's kind of a non-question now. Because I was going to say, like, because she was always the hero that would always deward my sentries, and I just kind of felt like I was obviously putting them in bad locations or just not dewarding hers fast enough. But you don't really lane really against kind of like a Ricky or a Bounty Hunter, and
Weaver's kind of like it. Weaver, I find, is the only hero that I really have consistent problems with, just being in Viz all the time. Or at least, a decent amount of the time, a sizable chunk of the time. Because, like, Bounty Hunter sucks, so I'm not worried about it. Like, he roams mid, and, like, a lot of times the cardinal rule that I find is that enemy teams will deward your ward once, but they're not going to ferry out 2 sentries. So, and like, especially because like their mid needs the courier for bottle, their safely needs it for phase boots. The offlaner is not going to build a second sentry. They're going to have one, and they're going to think, "Oh man, I won." No pun intended. I won the lane. Then you just bring out another one, and then you deward theirs. If you're in like a stack, or even if you're just in pubs and you're coordinating, tell your safe laner that may have a quelling blade, I'm about to deward, or I'm about to put a sentry down. Get that sentry ASAP. Like, tango it or quelling blade it, or just run up and jump on it and kill it right away.
So I
yeah.
can hear in your kind of, I can hear your disdain for Bounty Hunter. Do you Oh,
He's actually a really good hero, but he's just a crap.
Oh,
he's
I
just
see.
terrible
Oh, I
off lane.
see.
That's more my disdain. I was thinking about the off lane.
Okay. Yeah, so I was going to say, like,
Anyway, yeah.
do you favor Bounty Hunter over Ricky? Because, like, I kind of place them in the same. And if I'm kind of like, oh, I want to play kind of a roaming invis hero, I'll usually pick Bounty Hunter over Ricky. Because I don't feel like Ricky does as much as Bounty Hunter does. But I don't know whether I'm just kind of seeing this from a very, like, narrow-minded kind of point of view.
They do similar things in the early game in the sense that they both roam, they're both invisible for most of the time, and both deal chip damage rather than like ganking you and suddenly bursting you down with a ton of damage, right? And both are just annoying, like period. Like they just exist to annoy people. But the key difference in each of these heroes is that Bounty Hunter scales as a utility hero that does some magic damage and is just kind of a big economic assistant for your team. Whereas Ricky scales in physical damage and in having a silence. So a Bounty Hunter is not going to give you any disable at all, ever in the game. Like maybe he'll build like a Sheepstick super late game or like an Orchid super late game. But a Ricky is always going to have a smokescreen, which is an incredibly strong skill.
True.
And the Ricky is not going to be able to give you vision whereas the Bounty Hunter is going to give you amazing information because of tracks. And the Bounty Hunter is going to be making you an incredible amount of money because of track gold. So both these heroes are similar in their laning phase. That's very correct. But as the game scales, they're suited to very different things. Like, if I have a mid lane Shadow Fiend and a safe lane Sven, I'm not going to play Ricky because my team does a ton of damage. What they need is vision to chase people down and kill them. And they need money because my team is super greedy. But if I have a mid lane, like a mid lane Zeus and a safe lane that's like, I don't know. Like, if I have a mid lane Puck and a safe lane Drow, I'm pretty fine with having actually, that's also kind of a bad example because I really like Zeus plus Bounty Hunter. But regardless, if I want physical damage and more importantly, I want the silence, then I'm going to be picking Ricky. Like against a Storm Spirit, I'm going to pick Ricky because I want to silence that guy and I want to murder him, right? That's it. Like, I want that person dead and I want them silenced, and that's how I counter them. Whereas if I play Bounty Hunter against a Storm Spirit, I initiate on him and then he just runs away because that's just how the hero works. So yeah, they're similar in like their playstyle in the early game, but they deal fundamentally different things. And Ricky builds aggressive fighting items and does a lot of damage, whereas Bounty Hunter builds like Guardian Greaves and a Solar Crest and like a pipe. So yeah. That's it for kind of all my any next question?
Yeah, we kind of touched on things that counter certain invis stuff. And I feel like we don't really want to go through like massive list of everything that counters everything else. So yeah. As talking about Dota tends to be, it does tend to drag on and on. Before we drag on and on about listener questions, let's go into our sponsors for today. So our first sponsor for today is Pugna, PVGNA. Find their website, www.pugna.com. Pugna is an online platform and community where high-skilled Dota players, including pros like Jenkins, who I watched his Legion Commander guide, 2 days ago. I learned a bunch. And other coaches create educational video guides on how to improve at the game, learn new heroes, and help folks climb the ranks if you want to make it from Ancient to Divine, or what is it? Eventually I'll memorize these ranks from Archon to Guardian, or Guardian to Archon, I think it is. I don't know. Pugna is completely ad-free, and each hero guide is divided into separate videos tackling specific concepts or heroes mechanics. For example, that LC guide I was talking about, it had one like 11-minute part that was specifically just on creep cutting, and then it had like one 20-minute part just on itemization and like the ideal 6 slots, and then I had like a 40-minute part that was just on like a full gameplay review where we just sat and watched the game. And then there were some like 6-minute, 7-minute parts, so I could watch it in chunks. You can learn quite a bit in just, a couple hours. It's very
it's very condensed, right? Similar to this. Like, we had an hour and we just talked about Invis, and that's it. Whereas, you could sit there for an hour and just learn LC, and that's it. No muss, no fuss, just one hero. There's plenty of content for players of all skill levels to learn from, so people from myself all the way down to the most newest player in the world. And also non-hero specific stuff. So there is stuff that's just like, hey, this is mid lane in 7.07, or this is, 7.07 in general, the changes. Yeah. So you could try out the full Pugna Pro subscription for 30 days, 100% free with our promo code FOURTH. You can find Pugna on Twitter at Pugna or at their website, www.pugna.com. I feel like it's 2017. We shouldn't be saying www anymore, but, here we are. Yeah, and also, by the way, if you tried our promo code last week, it was not working because it was processed wrong, but it's working perfectly now. So try again if that got messed up. I got a couple messages about that, but it's all good now. Our other sponsor is Unicorn, as UNIKRN. Everybody's choosing to spell their names weird and new nowadays. Unicorn is your premier esports outlet. You can earn tokens to bet just by playing your favorite games. You can earn those tokens on unicorn.com/connect, CONNEKT. I've gained, I haven't checked mine in like a couple days, but I gained a whole bunch of gold that I can now spend in raffles to win some items. I'm quite the item hoarder, so this is particularly exciting for me. There's also completely legal and free-to-play esports betting, as well as real money betting if you are in the UK or Australia, but not America. Unicorn also offers other great Dota 2 content, including, their full editorial section. They have articles from everything, pro analysis, pub play, stuff like that, from people like Gorgon and other writers from there. Like I said, Unicorn also has Unicorn Connect, where you can earn Unicorn Gold. You can also get that from playing CSGO or League, if you deign to play those games. I know we have quite a few CSGO players that listen. No, I don't think we have many LoL players, though. You can trade in for chances to win cosmetic items at, like we said, no cost to you. It's all free. You can find more info on that at unicorn.com/connect, and that is unicorn with a K and connect with a K. So, yeah, or also unicorn without an O, the UNIKRN. So, thanks to our sponsors, and B, shall we get into some questions? All right, let's see. We have a couple questions that are decidedly proud questions, so I'm going to avoid those lest I give an incorrect answer or an unsatisfactory answer. So, let's see. Migs said in a question, he was asking about the various different interactions with Kinetic Field from Disruptor. He was wondering if fly abilities like Winter Wyvern's Arctic Burn or Phoenix's Sunray or Batrider's... Man, I was doing so good with the spell names. Batrider's Firefly, or Night Stalker's Stalker in the Night. You cannot get... he was wondering if you can get over Kinetic Field with those things, which logically, it would kind of make sense that you could. But you cannot get over Kinetic Field with any flying mechanic. I tested this before we recorded. If you are a Batrider, you'll be stuck at the edge of the thing, even though the way that it looks, you are like flying way above it. So yeah, you cannot fly. Yeah, you cannot fly over those things. Similarly, you cannot force staff through a kinetic field unless. So kinetic field has that like what is it like? It has like it's like a half second or a 1 second delay between when it's put down and when it's active. You can force staff or fly out of it while it's inactive, but once it's active, you're stuck.
So like whilst it's kind of forming, you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, so you can blink out of it, though, whether it's through a blink dagger, because obviously it doesn't deal damage. You can do it with a blink dagger or with a hero that has a blink on it, like a Quap. You can also, this is like if you want some sneaky plays, you can actually Manta style or use CK ult, I think, through it. But there's a bit of RNG to it, and it's very difficult to do. You basically, all you do is you run straight into the kinetic field wall. I'm drawing on a piece of paper that none of you can see. You just run straight into the edge of the wall, and you use Manta right when you're hitting the edge of the wall. And the way that Manta works is it spawns 2 illusions, and obviously it resets you. So if you think of it like a triangle, if it is spawning 1 illusion at the top point of the triangle, and then 1 at the 2 base bottom points, if you RNG your way into being the one at the top of the triangle, you will move through the field. And then, but if you and your illusion spawn as the two bottom ones, you will still stay in the field. So that's like a bit of RNG to it. Similarly, CK ult works like that. I think there might be one other way to like kind of bug through the side of the wall.
Like, incredibly
but
difficult
I can't remember
to
off the top of my
actually
head.
do.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like I've done it once and I was on stream and I don't think I've ever been so proud of myself on stream.
That's like the best moment to be streaming, when you do something just like...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, an easier example would be Doppelganger from PL. Like you could Doppelganger over the wall. I'm really trying to think. I'm just looking at the hero list and I cannot... I feel like there is an exception. Anyway, if you're BKB'd, you can move through the wall, of course. Also, you can't be forced out of the wall, which I think also means that you cannot be knocked out of the wall by anything. I'm not in... I don't want to take 10 minutes to set up a Dota lobby, so I'm pretty sure if a Bat Rider hits you with his Flame Break, it cannot knock you out of the wall.
Can you pounce out of it if
you're
slug?
No. Oh, God. I really need to enter a thing for this now. I don't think you can. I think you have to use spells that take you off of the map temporarily. Things like Mantis Style, that technically takes you off the map, or things like Blink Dagger, where you are just going from point A to point B. Whereas if you are a Slark, Pounce is dragging your physical body to the end of it. But I mean, a Slark, you should pounce out of it from the get-go, right? Like when it's still in that creation point. That's why I don't know. Yeah, let's see. What's the other parts of that question? Burrow Strike, I believe you can Burrow Strike out of it. You can Waveform out of it. Huskar can jump. I have no clue if Huskar can jump out of it. Io can relocate out of it, but God, now I realize why Migs asked this question. There's so many little tiny weird hero specific mechanics that function this. Snowball will definitely get you out of it because Snowball takes everybody out of the map. I really do, like, I think this comes down to it is that things that either make you obviously spell immune, like Rage from a Life Stealer, or things that take you off of the map, like Storm Spirit ult, or like Snowball, or like Manta Style, or like Blink, will get you out. Yeah, but you definitely can't fly over it. That's the first part and the most important part that I read. I was like 99% sure when he asked me this question individually. I was like, I'm fairly certain you can't fly out of it, but I didn't test it at the time, but I did test it now, so you cannot fly out of it. Okay, all right. Disruptor's really good now, by the way. He's a pretty high pick rate at whatever tournament's going on right now. Yeah, I can't remember what tournament it was specifically, but I was looking at them. On Ardo too, they have that like meta analysis threads for tournaments, and he had a pretty high pick rate. I like him a lot. I do like stuns though, so that's why I normally don't pick him.
You could pick a support with a stun.
Yeah, or you could pick... I mean, like, he has an instant cast silence. That's AoE, which is pretty legit. But, you know, stuns are nice, too. Stuns also silence people, if you think about it. So, who's really to say what's better? All right, let's see. We'll do one last question from Tanaden. So, Tanaden asks... what are some heroes that could use Helm of the Dominator? Is it okay? Is it an okay sub for a Vanguard if the enemy team lacks right-click damage? So I would not equate Helm of the Dominator to Vanguard. If we look at what they give us, let's pull it up. So Helm of the Dominator is two to all attributes, which is like almost no health, and it gives you, well, let's see, it's 40 health, a third of an armor, and like 20 mana. And then it gives you 10 attack speed. And in an AoE, it provides 8 HP regen and then 15 attack speed to everybody, 900 AoE. And then it gives you Dominate, of course, so you can gain, whatever Dominated creep. The item, it only costs you 2,000 gold. So that's the only real similarity with Vanguard, is that Vanguard's 2150, but the Helm of the Dominator is 2,000. In general, I don't build Helm of the Dominator, I'll be honest. I think this item is in a really weird place right now. The only hero that I think it's quite good on would be Vengeful Spirit, if you're playing her as a support and you want to snowball Or even if you're playing her as like a really early snowball core, I think you can swing it. But I feel like this item does not give you enough stuff to be useful on cores, or even on supports for that matter. It's too expensive for most supports, and it's too like it does not give you enough to be worth it on cores. That's kind of my official opinion on Helmet Dominator.
So you were saying you would
I'd
build
maybe
it
build it on Chen.
on Avenge. Interesting.
Yeah. So Venge builds a ton of auras, and she's really good at accenting a full team. So if you're giving them on top of your, let's see, Vengeance aura is 30% bonus damage in a 1200 AoE, and then you add a Helmet Dominator. Not only are you giving everybody 30% more damage, you're also giving them, let's see, what was it? Is 15 attack speed? You're giving them 15 attack speed. You're giving them the health regen by 8 health regen is a lot of health regen. And that is good for the playstyle that Venge really likes, in that you're pushing. And you also, on top of this, have to think about, you're getting a dominated creep.
Yeah.
So let's say you get a satyr. Excuse me, you get a satyr. Suddenly you have, what is it? I think satyr things like 8 regen also, or like 6 maybe. Regardless, you're getting a whole bunch of health regen from that. Or you're getting ideally, you're getting a wolf, and the wolf is giving you even more damage and crit to your carries, or to your cores, I should say. So it fits really well with the Venge playstyle and with her stats, and with the fact that Venge doesn't need to build items. Like, what items does Venge build? Like, she builds a bunch of utility items, like a Solar Crest. But you can also just get away with just having a medallion. That's more than enough. And then, maybe you build a Force Staff, or maybe you transition to being a core. But Helmet Dominator lets you do all these things. Right, it gives you a lot of stuff that you want, and the build-up is very easy. Right, the build-up for the new HOD, I forget when they changed this. New build-up for the HOD is a headdress, a ring of health, and glove of haste. So all these items are, well, one of them is 850 gold, but the two other ones are very cheap, and the build-up is pretty cheap, pretty easy.
That's so interesting. Like, Venge is one of my most played heroes, and I've never thought about building Helm on her. I will do that the next time I play, maybe.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, back when Helm was super OP, when it was giving like 8 or like 6 to all attributes or something. I don't know the change log up. People were building on Venge and even Crystal Maiden like every game, because it was just super efficient. And the auras and the active abilities from neutral creeps are actually really good. Like it's like, for instance, the Frost Troll's Frost Armor is like 10 armor, I want to say, something like that. It might be even more than that. Like, that's an incredible passive that you're getting for 2,000 gold. And they're not exactly hard to find, the Frost Golems. And also, you keep everything alive. Like, you keep your whatever you've dominated, you keep it alive because you give it 8 health regen.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, yeah, it adds up. It really does. I think Chen is the only honorable mention that I would build this item on. I feel like I said, like, the item is in a weird place where I would build it on a lot of other heroes, like maybe Beastmaster would be cool with it, but the problem is Beastmaster wants other items. Like, 2,000 gold is a very restrictive amount of money for a lot of offlaners and also a lot of supports, and it's not enough of a big item for you to ever build it on a mid or a safe lane, except for like if you're doing some weird cheese comp where you just like try to run down mid or something at like 15 minutes. So yeah, it definitely falls under that category of there's just better items to buy in a lot of cases. And so yeah, that's kind of my full thesis on Helm of the Dominator is I'd build it on Venge, and maybe I'd build it on Chen.
So I'm just
I can't really think of anyone else I'd build it on.
Most used this week is on Drow.
Yeah, I suppose it works into Drow's mechanic as well. She wants to push early, so you can pick up the HOD and then 5-man down towers. You can pick up a Direwolf and just keep that with you, and have like HOD and a Dragonlance, and just be running at towers, and it's incredibly hard to fight into you. Interesting, I guess. I personally don't like it on Venge. I personally don't like it on Drow, because I would rather have other items. But she also has some freedom in her build. I guess if you're not going Mask of Madness, you could go with HOD, and that's decently effective. That sounds good to me. Is Venge up there? I hope Venge is up there. Otherwise, I'm going to sound like an idiot.
I'm just going back onto it. Hang on a second. Venge is on there. But
Okay, good. I'm pulling it
Luna.
up myself. Yeah, a gyrocopter, a Luna, Lycan. Lycan's pretty interesting, and Beastmaster. Yeah, so Beastmaster has it as the 5th most bought item.
But
Avenge
still
is down by like 9th. Man, some of these make no sense to me. Nobody builds this item, honestly. Like even the most bought item, or the here that's bought this item the most this week, it only has
it just seems
15,000
that
games.
no one's using it.
Like that is not a lot. I want to see what's the least popular item. Least popular item, other than like the fake ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the least popular major item. Yeah, I mean, like there's certain things lower than it, but they're all like transitionary items, like Necronomicon level 1 and 2. Of course, those are lower because everybody ends game with level 3. Or like a Buckler. Like, of course, Buckler's low, but like because you build it into other things. So yeah, it's the lowest major final item. So yeah, that's sad, very sad. All right, somehow Animal Courier is a very low ranked item. But the problem is you can't buy an Animal Courier anymore, can you? Because you buy one at the beginning of the game and then it gets set down immediately. So I guess, actually the only way you could do it theoretically, and of course this is completely worthless to talk about on a podcast, but that's fine. The only way you could do it is if you don't build it in pregame, if you don't buy it in the score screen, and then you buy it and then you just hold it the entire game. Because if you buy in the score screen, or if you buy like in the pregame, it automatically sets it down. But if you don't buy it, your other supports won't buy it either, and you can buy it, and then if you just never set it down, your team will just never have one.
Don't do that.
I don't know, somebody that's a very not nice person. And it still has an 18% win rate. So that means 18% of the time people are doing that, and then still winning, and then still winning. Yeah. That's bizarre. Yeah, so that's our lesson for the day. If you want to grief people, is don't buy the courier in the pregame. Buy it in once the game is started, and then you can just hold on to it forever.
That's a new way, isn't it? To upset your teammates. Don't do that, friends.
Yeah. Yeah, please don't. That's not 4th Spirit endorsed. All right. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else before we close out the show, Beedub?
Not from.
All right, good. I'm gonna take that comment with as a that we've finished everything in totality and all questions have been answered for forever. So next week you will find Beedub and Proud here on this time slot on Teach Me Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter. I am at Ursinity. I was gonna say Proud is at Proud Dota, but he's on the show. That's still his Twitter if you want to follow it. B is at AUPBeedub, AYUPBEEDUB. You can find 4th Spirit at 4th Spirit. You find our website that Proud's been working on that is finally shaping up. You can find all the episodes on there at 4thspirit.com. You can also find all the shows on any podcast app you want. And also tell a friend. That's the best way to support us. Another way to support us is Patreon, patreon.com/defense of the patience. That's incorrect. Patreon.com/4th Spirit. My plug brain has gone into effect and I'm just going on automatic speak. Yeah, don't go to, you can go to patreon.com/defense of the patience. Nothing is there. But patreon.com/4th Spirit, that's where, let's see, right now I think we're like $20 short of Proud and I playing Dark Souls and Proud just berating me for like hours at a time. So that's going to be fun. I'm very looking forward to that. We've had that idea for like literally maybe 6 months, maybe longer than that. And we've just been like, man, this is a really good goal, but we just don't want to like put it out there for nothing. So that's why we wanted to make it our first 4th Spirit goal, because we're excited to do it and we think it's going to be very, very fun. So yeah, check out all that there. They also have Patreon exclusive episodes. There's one going up probably by the time you hear this, it's already gone up. It's a hero exclusive on just OD. So it's just Proud and I talking about OD for like 30 minutes. It's very all inclusive, very, thorough, just about OD and nothing else. We have other plugs, but I don't remember them. YouTube.com/4th Spirit for all the TCT VODs, or if you prefer to watch podcasts or listen to podcasts because there's no video. If you want to listen to podcasts there, you can do that.
I think you got them all.
Probably something else. I don't know. Discord.gg/4th. I made a list for Proud because Proud was like, I can't do the plugs because there's just too many. And then now I'm realizing that I need this list because I always forget plugs. So yeah, send us in questions for Teach Me Tuesday to show@4thspirit.com. And give us iTunes reviews on iTunes. That helps also. I think I got everything, and if I didn't, I'm sorry. Oh, I made a subreddit today because somebody asked me to. So reddit.com/r/4thspirit. I'll put up graphics there later, but I did it at work. Anyway, that's a podcast. So thanks to our sponsors, Pugna and Unicorn. Check them out and support us. And goodbye, everybody. Thanks for listening. We've all learned a little bit about each other, a little bit of ourselves, and a little bit about invisibility, hopefully. Or a lot of it about invisibility.